NYU community for this, which is the 17th Speakers on the Square lecture. This is an event which we've been running under the auspices of our Alumni Association, which represents, of course, nearly 500,000 alumni around the world, and it's designed to bring alumni together with the rest of our community back here at the Square to celebrate graduates of our great university that when you look at them, you see the ideal that we hope every single member of the community reaches. They live lives that we dream for our students. So tonight's conversation is co-sponsored with the NYU Leadership Initiative, which began here a year ago in response to student interest, folks that wanted to be trained as leaders. And our students and faculty, administrators, and alumni worked together with the extraordinary Melody Barnes, former domestic advisor to President Obama. And it's a hub for all of the leadership activities here at NYU. So thank you to the Alumni Association. Thank you to the Leadership Initiative for bringing us this extraordinary program tonight, which offers two NYU products that really do represent our best. The conversation will be led by the magnificent Maria Bartiromo. Maria is a graduate of the college, was called Washington Square College then. Now it's the College of Arts and Sciences. She was a major in journalism. Today she's one of the most highly regarded financial journalists in the country, most recently anchoring on Fox, the opening bell with Maria Bartiromo, and then her Sunday show on the Fox News Channel, Sunday Morning Futures with Maria Bartiromo, which dominates, by the way, that time slot. We're very proud of the fact that once she began that show, Fareed Zakaria of Yale had to move to the side for Maria Bartiromo. She brings her invaluable expertise and insight to our Board of Trustees, but also to many other organizations. I have to say, we're her top priority, but she is one of the young global leaders at the World Economic Forum. She's on the Council on Foreign Relations, Economic Club of New York. But most of all, anytime she's asked to do anything for NYU, she does it. And I have to thank her for that. So she'll bring her extraordinary talents to a conversation with the mayor, Mayor Bill de Blasio. He's a native New Yorker. He's devoted almost his entire life to working on behalf of New York City, from early days as a City Hall staffer to his role in the Department of Housing and Urban Development as the senior official for the New York, New Jersey area. Of course, a council member, public advocate, and now mayor. But most importantly, he's one of ours. When he came in, he knew to expect a hug, and he said to me, "It's good to be home." Now, he's the fourth NYU alumnus to be the mayor of New York. You can trace it back to Fiorello LaGuardia. But he's the first undergraduate alumnus to do so. He was a presidential scholar when he came here. He appropriately earned his degree in Metropolitan Studies, graduating from what was by then the College of Arts and Sciences in 1984. The mayor, some would say, looked different then. New York City certainly looked different in 1984. The economy was beginning to come back. It was booming, but the crime rate was high. Some called us the crime capital of the world. The plague of AIDS had just begun to take its terrible toll on the city. And in the mayor's office, there was a different NYU alum, Ed Koch. And NYU looked different as well. The now tired Kohl's Sports Center had just opened. The School of the Arts had just been renamed the Tisch School of the Arts. The Study Away program consisted of a program run in Spain by the Spanish Department for Spanish majors and in Paris by the French Department for French majors. So we were a very different place. Bill de Blasio brought his energy to this place. You could see even then his power of political organizing. It was very apparent during his NYU days. He helped found the NYU Coalition for Student Rights. He served on the Weinstein Resident Hall Student Council. He led protests against the president of the university, galvanizing fellow students. Today, he lends that same passion and the talents he honed here to advocating for the people of New York. We're proud of the fact that he's selected so many NYU alumni and faculty, even current students, to serve in key positions in his administration. And we're deeply proud to welcome these two extremely special people, stars in the pantheon of NYU, back home, Maria and the mayor. Here they are.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us. And Mayor de Blasio, let me echo John's comments. It's great to have you here at NYU.
Thank you, Maria.
Well, how does it feel back on your old stomping ground?
I do feel like I'm at home. You said it first, by the way, before President Sexton said it when I came in the door. It does feel like home. By the way, I want to say President Sexton misrepresented one key fact. I was the president of Weinstein Dormitory for 1 year. And I often say it was a rather chaotic scene in the early 1980s at Weinstein Dormitory.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that was a distinguished role to be president over sort of anarchy, but it was a wonderful place, and I had an incredible experience here. I want to just say at the outset, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank President Sexton for the leadership he's shown here, and he's done some very important thinking about the future of New York City and the future of cities. I want to thank him for that. I want to say a special thank you to you, Maria. I think some people in this audience know this. Anyone who is a Brooklynite, a born Brooklynite and adopted Brooklynite, feels something about Maria Bartiromo because she's a true Brooklynite who rose to the highest heights. And anyone who's Italian-American feels a lot about her, and your success, your stardom is something a lot of us are very personally proud of. And thank you for all you do for New York City as well. Let's give her a round of applause.
Back at you, raising the roof for Brooklyn there, Mr. Mayor. So you were quite the political dynamo when you were here. John said a couple of the things that you pushed. You wanted to get a student on the Board of Trustees. You wanted to create a student Bill of Rights. You wanted to know where the money was going, if in fact they were going to raise tuition.
Have you ever had that feeling? Any of you ever wanted to know where the money was going?
Well, what's your best memory of NYU?
I have a lot of great memories. I do want to say that in the protests around the tuition issues and all, we had one moment at Bobst Library I'm very, very proud of. We were told by security that if we congregated, we would be detained or removed or whatever it was. So we realized if we kept moving, that we would not be detained. So we had a kind of serpentine protest where we just kind of did figure eights in groups, and we were not detained, but we got our point across. So that was a lot of fun. But the whole experience, I loved Weinstein. I loved the people I met, many of whom are still friends. There was, and I'm sure still is, an incredible energy. I tell people who I meet from around the country, Washington Square Park was my campus. And I learned much more, I'm certain, from the life of the city around me than in the classroom alone. But I had a very, very rich experience and certainly an energizing experience about public service, and here I am.
And me too. That's why
Yes.
we love NYU. Okay, so you're just passing your first 100 days.
Yes.
Let's talk about it. How has it been? What can you point to as your biggest achievements? Where are still the challenges?
It's been extraordinary in the sense of, one of the things that we know about the mayoralty of New York City, of course, every potential challenge comes to your doorstep. We were talking about earlier, you're going to get critiques, you're going to get lawsuits, you're going to get a lot of things. But the ability to get things done, it's really one of the great opportunities in public service in this country to get a lot done quickly and well. It is a fantastic bully pulpit to get out ideas. So I'm very proud of the fact, look, I came into office saying we had to grapple with the issue of inequality. We had to be honest about it. We had to talk about where the city's going, where this country is going, and come up with real solutions if we were going to continue to have a society of opportunity, if we were going to protect the notion of a middle class and an inclusive society. We had to do something. The beauty of this role is there are real tools to act with. I went up to Albany with the goal of getting full-day pre-K for every child in the city, with the goal of getting after-school for every middle school student. The notion to me was not only was it about the here and now and helping parents helping kids now, it was also about something fundamental to change the future trajectory of the city, to really create a greater opportunity across the board. Education being the determinant of economic future at this point in history more than any other previous point. And that was attainable. It took a lot of work, it took a lot of developing public support, but it was attainable and we got it done. And that and some other things we've done, the extension of paid sick leave to over 500,000 people, the reforms we've made in stop and frisk, and the changes in the relationship between police and community that are starting at the neighborhood level. These are big things that'll have a lasting impact, and this role allows me to make those changes with the involvement of so many people around the city. I can't ask for more than that. It's an extraordinary privilege.
Big successes. What are you looking to do from here out? What are the big challenges that you're still finding hard to break?
The challenge of inequality in our society is deep-seated. And there are a lot of good people who have said to me, can you approach this on the local level? Is it not bigger than that? Isn't it something that's beyond the reach of a city? My answer is we're obligated to do all we can do. And yes, at the same time, try to engage state government, federal government, the private sector into a much bigger effort that would be the truest way to address the issue. Obviously, I wish we had a different dynamic in Washington. I wish there was more movement and progress going on in Washington. But I think it is particularly because there isn't action in Washington that localities have to act. And so we found, when we looked at the tools we had, look, if you can give people paid sick days who don't have them before, that gives them a little more economic stability. If you can give a family pre-K and after school, that would cost them a lot of money if they had to go pay for it. It gives them both the future for their children, a brighter future, but also takes off a burden. If you can, for example, one of our big thrusts ahead is to create a really huge affordable housing program, 200,000 units over the next 10 years. If you can address the number one expense in people's lives, which is housing, in this city, a lot of people paying almost half their income for housing. If you do all that, you can actually start to create a little more balance, create a situation where you can have an economically diverse city, which has been the history of this place. I mean, look, our forebearers, I can speak, I think, for your story and mine. My grandparents came here from southern Italy with very little, without a lot of connections, and they had to just build from scratch. And by the way, 100 years ago in New York City, you could do that easily. It took work, but you could do it. The pathway was there. Even 30, 40 years ago in New York City, the place was pretty consistently affordable and there was opportunity. Now, with the affordability crisis, with the changes in the economy, with the greater demands in terms of educational background, we've got to take very aggressive actions if we're going to address the inequality in our society. So the sum total of all that is we have the tools in New York City to do a lot. We can't wait on Washington. We can't wait on other parts of our society to act. We've got to set the pace here. The 200,000 units of affordable housing, huge opportunity, huge challenge. Very intricate, very difficult. You know a lot about the housing market. It can be done. It will take a lot of individual transactions, a lot of smart moves in terms of the relationship with developers, figuring out the balance point, making sure the public gets their fullest share, but that development keeps moving. So there's challenges ahead, but what I like is we have a very clear game plan. We know why we're here.
But the idea of income inequality, that suggests that everyone should have the same income. Is that what you're saying, or are you saying opportunity inequality?
I think the reason we say income inequality, I think the question is very powerful. I think we say income inequality because it's a touchstone for a bigger set of challenges. At this moment, the fact is the most intense income disparity we've had in this city since the Great Depression. So it's a touchstone to say, look, something's happening here. It's not to begrudge people who have done well. People who have done well contribute a lot to the city. They pay a lot of taxes. A lot of them are very charitable. It's looking at the fact that skew talks also, and most importantly, about the fact that many, many people are falling behind, and that the things that used to bring a little more balance, the fact that there was such access to the middle class, the fact that there was pretty universal opportunity, as that has fallen away, as that's gotten a lot harder, it really threatens the cohesion of our society. It threatens the future of our society. It certainly threatens some of what makes New York City so great, which has been the openness, the entrepreneurship, the creativity. So no, it's not saying we expect a perfect equalization of the world. It's saying that this kind of skew starts to undermine some of our strengths. It certainly deprives a lot of people of a sense of hope. Again, looking at our ancestors, they had an implicit sense of hope that not only would they do better than their circumstances in Italy or wherever, whatever country people came from, or coming up from the south of America, they thought the next generation would undoubtedly do better.
And they did.
And they did. But today, think of a lot of people we talk to all day. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience feel the same thing. There's a great deal of anxiety, not only about our current generation's economic stability, but what will be for the next generation. I think there's not that assumption that it will be better. There's fear it will be worse. Well, that says we have something we have to correct. And what I hope we are showing here in New York City is there's real ways to correct that. We have tools. Sometimes you have to build more of a consensus. Sometimes you have to show people they work, but we have tools and we're using them.
And one of the tools is education.
Yes.
Education creates opportunity for people. So what can you do? I mean, obviously pre-K was a big success for you, but what about higher education? NYU is a global university. We know we're competing with the world. What can NYU do to help that inclusiveness and, in fact, make sure that New York is also the lead in the global cities?
I would say two things. One, separate from this question of NYU alone, I would say we know that the strength of higher education in the city is going to determine a lot of our future. So we have NYU, we have CUNY, we have Columbia, we have a lot of great assets, Fordham, so many other great schools. We're adding, because, for example, we're going to have Cornell Technion on Roosevelt Island, which is a great thing. And you know I had some areas of agreement with Michael Bloomberg, some areas of disagreement. This one, the Applied Science Center on Roosevelt Island, is just a home run for the city. It's a great thing. But what a lot of folks in the tech sector have said to me, they love that, but they need something much more. And this is where CUNY becomes a crucial piece of the equation. The tech sector is growing. It's incredibly exciting what this could mean for the future of the city. It's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of good paying jobs. It's a lot of high opportunity jobs that a lot more people who live in New York, who grew up in New York City, should be able to access. We need to do better at the high school level to prepare our young people. We need to do better with CUNY, which is the great tool we have to reach a lot of people. One of the things I'm most excited about is to expand the STEM offerings at CUNY, 2-year and 4-year opportunities. So I start by saying I think the higher education complex of this city is going to play an even bigger role in our economic future than it ever has. But there's some things we have to do strategically to change the approach to maximize, particularly in terms of the orientation to the tech sector, one example. Now, in terms of NYU itself, look, it's an extraordinary place. I obviously feel a lot as an alumnus. The fact is, I think NYU is one of the pace setters and tone setters for New York City. I do think this university being more deeply involved with our public schools is crucial. I think folks who are part of this university and are connected to companies and sectors that can be employment engines for folks who have been left out of the economy, because we have a lot of people in the city today who really have lost that consistency about getting employment opportunities and need a restart. And that's what the effect of the last 5 years of this economy has done to a lot of people. This university can be so central to creating some new types of economic opportunities, employment opportunities. So what I would think is NYU, like any great academic institution, a bit of a conscience by its very nature, could really help us to animate this notion that we're going to fight inequality in very tangible ways by creating employment pathways for people who haven't had them, by helping our public schools get better all the time. And the higher education community can do so much to reach into our high schools and middle schools and play a very active role, get involved in the schools, provide internships and mentorship, and so many very tangible pieces more visibly show our public school students a pathway to college. So I think there's a number of great roles that NYU could play in this.
I think it's a really good point that you make, and I'm glad you brought up employment. We've got so many students in the audience, and they're thinking about when they graduate, what's their next step? Where are the jobs? Yeah. Now, your campaign certainly shaped you as really the grassroots leader versus Michael Bloomberg as, you know, the guy who was global, dealing with the elite, dealing with business. Business creates jobs, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to walk this balance where you continue to focus on the neighborhood, focus on the grassroots level, but also ensure that New York is in the lead, stays in the lead as a global leader in the world, because you've got Shanghai and you've got Hong Kong and you've got London all vying for that leadership position, and not alienate business by some of that rhetoric?
No, I appreciate the question because it gets to the heart of several things. Obviously, the question of sort of rhetoric versus the work we do in government, the tangible work we do. And I actually think, it's, as in the rest of life, it's really important to judge someone by their actions. A lot of folks I know in the business community, as we've talked about the specific elements of the plan I'm working on, when they see what pre-K and after school means for the future of our workforce, they say, wait a minute, that's in our interest too. When they think about paid sick leave, for example, a lot of people had initial hesitation until they saw the statistics in terms of what it did for productivity, longevity at the workplace, the fact that it led to a lot more employee loyalty, obviously kept sick people from making other people sick because they had an option. A lot of people, as they look at the details of these ideas come around, a lot of people in the business community wanted to find a way to see the city be safe but reduce some of the tensions at the neighborhood level, and they applaud Bill Bratton for the changes that that I've been honored to make with him in terms of the relationship between police and community. So I think the substance has a very broad appeal because in the end it's quite common sense about the things we have to do to make this a more unified city, a more productive city, a city of opportunity. I think the other part of your question, can you do the grassroots and the private sector piece at the same time? By definition, you can. I agree that that's been in the public debate kind of opposed, but I think wrongly. The city historically worked when those two things were in sync. We've always had a city for generations where the vast majority of people lived in the outer boroughs. The neighborhood was the center of their lives, and the city functioned very well in terms of creating affordable housing, creating a good working school system, the things that provided that underlying reality. Business thrived in that environment too. The two had a certain organic unity. That, to some extent, has become derailed again by the economic crisis and so many other changes. We've got to create that again. We've got to create a dynamic where we are going to be the most competitive in the world, and by the way, in tech, in film and TV, in finance, go down the list, communications, media. There's so many areas where we are naturally so strong, and in many ways getting stronger all the time. So wouldn't it be best for our competitiveness if the message was, let's strengthen the foundation. Let's have a city where people feel they're really on the move again, there's hope, there's opportunity, they see their schools getting better, which, by the way, again, so many people in the business community say the investment decisions are one of the biggest things they look for is the quality of education, right? Schools getting, the safe community, more unified community, cities, schools getting better, all these pieces moving at once allow the neighborhood piece to be strong and the competitive dynamic to be strong as well.
So do you think you will get the business community to buy into it? I mean, when you think about the policies that business is against, higher minimum wage, unionization, these things that you believe will take the city to the next level, will you be able to get business to buy into that?
I believe the fact I'm being interviewed by Maria Bartiromo will allow business to like me. I think this will be the crossover moment. Historians will say this is the moment where the rapprochement began.
Okay,
okay. Look, I want to separate again the ideological from the practical. I know where I stand ideologically. I'm very proud of it. I believe that the fight against inequality is crucial. I do believe that people being in labor unions is one of the reasons why we had that strong middle class and that opportunity society. I do believe in things like paid sick leave and the kind of tools we can use to give people a little more economic security. I'm not changing on that. And yeah, there are some people in the business community who oppose that. There's some who agree with it. It's a mix. Where we have a lot of unity, I think, is we want to get things done. Of course, the private sector is the job creation engine. The private sector, however, and the most, I think, honest and insightful leaders in the private sector will be the first to say this, depends greatly on the public sector. Our competitor, I always make the point, our competitor nations, the strength that they have shown in recent years, India, China, Germany, you go down the list, Brazil, so much of that had a public sector component, investment in infrastructure, education, or other policies that helped energize job growth. Right.
Public-private partnership.
And so to me, we have our own variation on that. We're going to work with the private sector to develop, because we need a lot more market rate housing and affordable housing in this town. We're going to work with them. We're going to work to build out the tech sector. We're going to work to build out the film and TV sector. There's a lot we can do together. Where I'm going to be consistent, though, is we have to take some steps to create greater opportunity and equality in the process. And I think some people may grumble, but still see that we can work together and get things done. I think other people in business are going to say, you know what, that's in everyone's long-term interest.
The areas that you're mentioning are really vibrant, and it's great to see New York City really getting rewired in terms of the hospitals, getting rewired in terms of technology. You know, in Brooklyn, you've got a whole Silicon Valley going on, right? So are those the areas where the jobs are being created? You've got students in the audience who are trying to figure out, where are the jobs? Where are the jobs in New York?
Well, I think the one thing I want to say is I think there's growth potential in a number of sectors. I think it's particularly obvious in tech and particularly obvious in film and TV, but I think there's a lot of other sectors that are going to be growing. By the way, manufacturing, you know, sophisticated manufacturing coming back strong in Brooklyn, for example. There, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, the Brooklyn Army Terminal, you know, leased up, really interesting manufacturing going on there, cutting edge, good paying jobs. There's so much potential because, you said earlier, we are the center of so many things, and they all connect now in ways, in some ways, much more deeply than ever before. Think about part of why we are doing so well with the tech sector is because we have the universities, because we have the hospitals, because of the research that goes on here, because of the communications sector that's already here, because the corporate sector that has either headquarters or major presence here. For the tech sector, that's like a dream world. There's so much available that makes the equation work. Now, where I think we have to do better, again, is training our own people to be able to access this. But I would argue that folks looking at this city in the future say, look, we're right now, we've passed 8.4 million people for the first time ever. We are on a track to 9 million. That was projected by the Bloomberg administration, 100% correct. Could be as early as 2030. Part of why we're furiously working on our affordable housing plan, 200,000 units over the next 10 years, is because we need housing in general to keep up with demand, and we certainly have to continue to make the place affordable. This plan, by the way, enough to house 400 to 500,000 people. This is big stuff. There's going to be job creation in that too. So I think it's fair to say this is a very fertile environment. There's a lot of possibility here, and sometimes it's tough, and I remember what it was like coming out of NYU myself, and you know, there may be a year or several years of struggle, but the long-term prospects here are outstanding. And the diversity of options, now thinking very individually. I mean, I don't know, I think I'm on firm ground here. I don't know any place else where there's so much opportunity in so many sectors and so much dynamicness and where the future looks this bright. So I say, stay here and stick it out because there's something good up ahead.
I agree with that. The problem is the competition is getting smarter too. As we speak, even with what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, the Russians are trying to become the Silicon Valley of the future with their Skolkovo project. As we speak, the Chinese are producing solar panels, not to use in China, but to sell them to the rest of the world. So how are you going to ensure that businesses are, in fact, continuing to innovate and creating jobs and capital doesn't start leaving? Because you've got the governor of Florida and the governor of Texas saying, don't worry about New York and higher taxes and a big regulatory environment. Come to Dallas, come to Florida. And we are seeing a capital flight.
I want to caution. We have seen some individual examples. We've also seen a lot of new, amazing investments being made. So I think it's a little, you know, I asked this question of a lot of smart people in business. I've talked to a number of economists, and the jury's really out on the overall dynamic, meaning, of course, some people have left, and we know some people have come in, and I'm not convinced that the numbers don't, at this moment, even out. But here's where I think we go. Our job is to always make the dynamics as favorable as possible for folks who want to create jobs. Okay, that comes with the territory. It's something I believe in. I think we have in this town still a lot of red tape we can get rid of. I believe that firmly. Often spoken about our buildings department, which is Byzantine and doesn't have to be, and we're going to work to reform that. We have had a pretty punitive dynamic towards small business in terms of fines and regulation. I think we can do a lot better and streamline a lot and fine less. I think we have done well, and I give the previous administration credit in sort of creating a welcome environment for these strong emerging industries who need a certain amount of support and involvement from the local government. We're going to amplify that. We're going to intensify that. So I think when you add up the things we can do to create a welcome environment for job creation, we have a lot of tools at our disposal. And then we have all of our pluses, meaning you're not going to find better talent anyplace else. You're not going to find this incredible diversity of resources. And I think that's part of why we're seeing this strength, this constant strengthening, because in a world where intellectual capital matters more than ever, this incredible concentration here, it's not lessening, it's growing. Then you could say, okay, what else can you do for me in the public sector? We're going to keep the city safe. I'm very proud to say in the first quarter of this year compared to the first quarter last year, crime overall down, murders down, shootings down, while we're bringing police and community back together. And then the other thing people would say is give us a really good school system. And I will put up where we are today and where we're going with pre-K and after school added and a lot of other things that we're adding to improve our school system. I think we're going to be able to show a lot of places that we're moving forward on education. And we, of course, have incredible higher education opportunities after that, after our public schools. We're moving forward in a way a lot of other places aren't. And again, I think smart investors, smart business owners are going to look at that and say, that's a pretty amazing package. And yes, there will be some taxes involved. Unquestionably, it's a higher tax environment than some, but you get a lot back in the bargain, and I think a lot of business people get that and they want to be here.
So are you prepared, like you wanted NYU to do back in the day, to show us where the money is going when you raise taxes on the highest earners? Mr. Mayor.
Ouch. I thought we had an alumnus bond here. Oh, the tables have turned quickly. Yeah, I feel, look, in my line of work, we have a pretty out-in-the-open budget process. And I think we've been able to show people already, but I just came out with my preliminary budget for next year. This is an extraordinary city with an annual budget now over $73 billion. We have pension investments now over $150 billion. I mean, we have extraordinary resources. We're very open about them. My preliminary budget, I tried to acknowledge the fact that we have huge fiscal challenges ahead, including open labor contracts. And we were very careful. We put a lot of money into reserve. We were very careful about our spending initiatives. And so I have to show people why we're making the decisions we're making. And I have to show them that their money will be spent well. That's an ongoing thing. So I would say compared to the dynamics I was facing in the early 1980s, I think we're pretty transparent.
Yeah.
And it's a constant dialogue, and it should be.
One area we didn't talk about is tourism. That's another great opportunity for New York, but I've got these numbers here. The Manhattan hotel occupancy rate in January 2014 was down from January 13. It was at 76.8, down from 77.8. Tourism has been a big driver of the economy. If you want to increase tourism, it means investment. How are you going to ensure that New York stays hot for the rest of the world to want to come here?
Look, I think we just naturally have an immense amount to offer. I think we have a great opportunity area with tourism more deeply into the whole city, into the outer boroughs. I just named Marty Markowitz, our city NYC and Co. Just named Marty Markowitz as a new vice president, former Brooklyn borough president, a new vice president to focus on outer borough tourism. And there's such potential. You've seen a lot of it in Brooklyn already, but it's equally true in Queens and the Bronx and Staten Island. By the way, there's a lot of interest in the Bronx from tourists from Europe and Asia because they want to see the origins of hip hop. And it's a true organic cultural thing about New York City that people want to experience, and they're willing to pay money to do it. God bless them. So, and so I think the fact is there's more of New York to discover. And we're going to do more to facilitate that. Tourism overall has continued to increase, even though I hear you on that one quarter with the hotel occupancy numbers. Writ large, tourism has increased in the last year. The challenge is I don't think we have to prove to people how interesting we are, right? I think we're continuing to add amenities to this city and additional features to the city all the time. I think we have to be smart about continuing our marketing efforts, which were very strong in the previous administration. I think they did a great job. We're going to continue that. I think we also have to look about the impact that the sector has within the city. The tourism industry has created a lot of jobs. Unfortunately, a lot of minimum wage jobs, many no-benefit jobs. We want to work closely with that sector to try and find ways to bring up the wage and benefit levels a little bit, to also create some opportunity for leadership or management positions for people who get into the industry, because it's a great access point to the economy for folks who didn't get the benefit of such a great education, perhaps, or haven't had as many other opportunities. Again, I want a strong middle class in New York City. So the tourism industry is a big part of it, but I think we do have to be a little more conscious with the industry of getting people's levels up a little more so they can get to that middle class.
I think you make a great point. You know, every time I'm talking to CEOs or managers of businesses who want to hire, they say they want to hire, they say they can't find the people who have the skill sets required. So how do we ensure that our New Yorkers are getting the right training to actually be in a position to get the jobs that are available?
We have to do more at the middle school and high school level to start that pathway. One of the things, you know, there's a whole reality in this city, as in many places. We have career and technical education, except it's been preparing kids for the jobs of 20 years ago or 30 years ago. The amazing thing, taking tech again as an example, is a lot of opportunity would exist even with thorough grounding through high school. There'd even be some immediate opportunity, even more so if we can achieve what we want to with CUNY, for example, with a 2-year STEM program. I've said very clearly we're going to link every high school in this city over time with either an employer or an employment sector or an institution of higher learning, because we want to, as we talked about earlier, we want to create that immediate connection where kids get to see from the high school years, they get to see that they have opportunity ahead, they get to learn about the workplace that would be available to them, they get mentorship, they get internships, et cetera. But that 2-year STEM program is a great example of a little bit more training. Goes a long way. What I've said is let's change some of our approach to our economic development strategy. There are some failed strategies of the past with subsidies for certain corporations that really didn't yield the jobs or the promises that were made weren't kept. My suggestion is get away from that traditional model, invest more heavily in education, invest more heavily particularly in higher education, this tech-focused piece I think being particularly productive. Let folks who grew up in New York City get that additional step in education that can get them into the good-paying jobs. Tech is one example. Film and TV is another. Healthcare is another.
Healthcare, big.
It's a hugely growing sector with a lot of good-paying jobs. What are we doing right now? We are bringing in tens, not just thousands, tens of thousands of healthcare professionals from outside the city because people don't necessarily have the skills. We can do a lot about that starting again at the high school level, certainly continue it with any institution of higher learning, but the one I focus on is CUNY because it's public and because we can make some investments there that I think will yield a big result.
That's another opportunity to have public and private partnerships.
Yes.
You've got to get business to be able to come to the table and say, we want to help mentoring, we want to help in terms of training programs for people so that they are best equipped. That's leadership. That's bringing all of these people to the table. Can you do it?
Mayor Bartiromo, I think, I'm ready to just pass the torch right now. She's very compelling. I'm like, yes, of course, because there's a desire out there. Meaning, I think, first of all, I think the people of this city know we have to do something differently. I always say, just focus at the grassroots, focus at the neighborhood level, focus at the family level. These last 5-6 years have really been dislocating to people. And they don't feel, in many, many parts of the city, don't feel economic security, and they want to get back to that. And they believe the government should, whether city, state, federal, find ways to re-energize the economy, create more opportunity, create more access. And that is the fight against inequality. So there's a demand at the grassroots that we find the way. And yes, of course it means convening with the private sector. It means a common cause. I also think in the business community, first of all, again, there's a lot of people in the business community who understand everything from developing our school system and developing our higher ed system, keeping our cities safe, creating more social cohesion are good for everyone. They're certainly good for the growth of their business. They're good for the growth of their markets. A lot of people in business understand if you don't have a middle class, who's buying your products, right? So there's plenty of practicality and enlightenment in the business sector. There's also a very civic and charitable impulse among a lot. Real estate industry folks always say, and they're right, their obvious industry, their tagline always is, other industries can move around the world, we're here, right? And a lot of them are very charitable, very involved. And I think the argument I make to them is, you know what, maybe we wouldn't be having the same conversation a quarter century ago. But in today's dynamic, we have to make these changes for the good of all. We have to make these changes so we can have the future that we expected to have. I think when I go forward to convene people, for example, help us as part of our plan to build 200,000 units of affordable housing, help us find a way to raise wages and benefits, help us find ways to get more graduates of New York City public schools into your workforce. I think there's going to be a lot of receptivity because it's the water we all swim in. And if it gets better for everyone, it certainly is good for the business community and it's good for the future of the city.
Yeah, but the onus is on you to bring us together, it seems to me. Over the last couple of years, because of inequality, income inequality, and because of just divisiveness out there, we have differences in terms of governing our country, governing our city, and we need to be brought together. And again, that's leadership. How can you bring both sides together so we're all in this together to ensure that New York stays great?
I would differentiate a sort of kumbaya notion that we all suddenly get along despite differences, which I don't think is going to happen, versus agreeing on some things we have to do together. I don't think, I just say it this way, I don't get caught up in my own hype. I'm proud of the fact that in the election last year, we created a kind of consensus. One office with 73% of the vote in this extraordinarily diverse city, and the city of so many backgrounds and so many opinions. We got some substantial agreement on some things we had to do. The question then is showing people practically how to do it. That's the leadership piece. Leadership, I often say to people, take the word for what it is. You're supposed to show the path, right? You're supposed to lay out a roadmap. And so I believe that what we've done already, starting with what we did in 100 days, but going into this next phase of deepening the connection with the private sector, deepening the ability with the real estate community to build the affordable housing.
Is that the next phase?
It has to be, because I think it is about saying, okay, we're showing some of the steps we can take to correct some of the problems we have. We're addressing the real needs of the people. We need to do this all together. Tremendous common interest from the grassroots to the school system, the higher education system, the business sector, et cetera. My job is to not say, let's all agree in the room, because that's impossible. My job is to say, I'm going to offer a way. I'm going to offer a way. I have this license, if you will. I have this imprimatur, this mandate to go show us a way. Come with me on it. Try it with me. Try it with me. And if it keeps working, keep going. And I think we're going to find it builds a practical consensus, because if it works, people will want to keep doing more.
Explain to us what went on with the charter schools. You had a tangle with the governor, and you ended up getting what you wanted for pre-K from Albany. You didn't get the tax increase. What happened?
I think it's pretty simple. I think the notion is my number one agenda item was to get full day pre-K for every kid in the city and to get after school for middle school kids, and I believed that a tax on the wealthiest New Yorkers was the most equitable and effective way to do it and the most reliable. Clearly, we knew from the beginning there would be opposition in Albany. But you know what? The political process, again, it's never going to be an opposition-free zone or a conflict-free zone. It's really about, can you build the consensus at the grassroots? And we went out to communities all over the city and we said, here's a way to get it done. And there was a lot of agreement and a lot of support. And it was felt in Albany. But there was obviously resistance in Albany to the particular vision I had. What we ended up with was still a good, strong result. 5 years of funding, enough to do these things. And so, from my point of view, it was a direct result of building that support over a long period of time that got us to the end. Look, beyond that, I would say, on the issue of charter schools, I've said very clearly, we're going to work with all parts of the school system. You know, the traditional public schools are the mother lode now. About 94% of the kids in our 1.1 million student school system go to traditional public schools, like I went to, like my kids have gone to, and Dante's still going to. About 6% of our kids go to charter schools. That charter schools matter to me too. The charter kids matter to me too. The charter family matters to me. By the way, the kids in Catholic schools matter to me too. The kids in Jewish schools matter to me too. The kids in Muslim schools matter to me. They're all part of our future, which is why, as we've created our pre-K program and our after-school program, we've welcomed religious schools to be a part of it. We've welcomed charter schools to be a part of it. So I think in the changes in policy that we made that were exactly what I said I was going to do in the election, I did not say as clearly as I should have. It's still an inclusive vision. We want to approach it differently than the previous administration. We want to make sure there's balance. If, for example, we're putting two schools together in the same building, we want to respect the one that was already there, which didn't always happen in the previous administration. But we want to embrace all kids and all families and all types of schools, and we're showing that we can do that. And I think that's the kind of thing that will lead to a working consensus. Again, not an ideological consensus, a practical consensus.
Where did you learn such leadership skills?
Did you at NYU?
I figured that. That's what I figured. This is a picture of Bill de Blasio. You can't see it, but wow.
I thought you were going to have it on the screen.
We've got to put this on the screen.
You have to put it on the screen.
You were really...
The people demand the facts.
I love this picture of you.
I thought you had it right for the screen.
I know, I don't have it on the screen, but I will get it up on the screen.
Quite
if
a
we
picture.
Can. How does one learn leadership?
I think you learn it by doing. I look back, I was involved in student government in high school, and I got to NYU. I remember very vividly, like the first days, I remember orientation and trying to figure out huge place, what do you do and all. And I felt very attracted to a few causes, and I went to some club meetings, and I got involved, and you immediately meet a circle of people, and suddenly we're doing things, we're putting on events, we're making posters, whatever, and you learn to work with people, you learn to figure out your plan for getting something done, and how to organize people, and then I got involved in student government, then as I said, raised up to the lofty level of president of Weinstein Dormitory, still my most distinguished title. Are there Weinstein residents in the crowd? Yeah. Wherever you find a rowdy element, I can guarantee you they live in Weinstein or once lived in Weinstein. But it's literally, I remember when I ran for student dorm president, I had to knock on doors and tell people why I was going to do something good for them. And you just learn it by doing it. The one thing I think a lot of folks miss in terms of a pathway to any kind of leadership is overthinking it. It is take your vision, whatever the heck it is, or your issue, no matter how mainstream or how seemingly obscure, and pursue it and put your stamp on it and try and build the thing that you believe in. It's a very entrepreneurial dynamic, really. I mean, that's one thing you can say about anything in terms of social change or activism, but certainly you can also say it about conventional politics. It's incredibly entrepreneurial. You put yourself out there with the strength of an idea, and if you have to find investors, you have to get attention for your idea, you have to build a consensus around it, and if you're willing to keep doing that and if you're good enough at it, you'll get somewhere, and if not, go back and try again. And so, to me, that's the thing. It's not that political science classes aren't good or master's programs aren't good. That's good, too. But the best way to learn is to throw yourself into the fray.
But where did you get the motivation to begin from the get-go? Does that come from home? Does that start at home?
I think it was home and the times I lived in. I think at home there was always a really vibrant conversation about the world around us. I had my oldest brother, Stephen, was draft age during Vietnam. It was, some things like that. We were very practical, tangible, real, feeling the issues of the day. So I think it was the home environment, and then I often say I got an incredible education in public life during the Watergate summer. I was 12 years old, for God's sakes, but it's hard to interpret to a contemporary audience what the Watergate hearings were like. But imagine the most dramatic thing you've ever seen, and it's true, and it's happening in front of your very eyes, and no one's ever seen anything like it before, and the world is turning on the TV every day for a whole summer. And I was riveted, like the whole country was. And I think the interesting subtext or the sort of underlying reality of the Watergate summer was a horrible thing was being uncovered. It was very painful. The media played a crucial role, thank you. But you know what? It showed that, shockingly, no matter how painful it was, the system was working and a lot of heroes emerged, and a lot of people actually did their jobs. It was very inspiring. So I think it was all that kind of context, both family and the times I was living in. I literally got to a point, even in high school, certainly when I was here, Nothing else made sense to me. It was like inconceivable to do anything but public service. It's the only thing that was true and exciting to me.
We're going to bring some students up because they want to ask you some questions. But before we do that, where are you going next? I know you've got a big job in New York, but am I sitting here with a future candidate for the president?
There's something in Maria Bartiromo's drinking water. We're very humbly involved right here in little old New York City. It's very kind of you to ask, but no, right now I've got plenty to think about for my second 100 days. So,
Mr. Mayor, we've got 6 students that are going to come up on stage, and they are from the Leadership Council here at NYU, and they want to ask you some questions. If we could
thank you.
come on out.
Come on forward. Are we looking stage right or stage left?
Here come our students.
I hope you.
I know. I wish
Can't
that.
someone
I'm
take a
going to
picture?
try to do that. I'm going to try to do that.
We need someone to help us with that.
Hi there. Say your name and please talk to the mayor.
Sure. Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Hey.
It's so good to see you here. My name is Mike Zhu. I'm a junior and an economics major in the College of Arts and Science. So my question to you is, you've talked a little bit about your motivations for going into public service. My question to you is, do you see any current issues that are maybe similar to what motivated you? And what incentives do you see for people today who are graduating to go into public service and take the road that you did?
On the first point, thank you for the question. By the way, I always thought when I was at NYU, the economics majors were the smart ones, so I commend you. On the first point, and I must say I'm inspired by my daughter Kiara on this, because the issues of climate change and how we produce food and how our economy interacts with our environment are very, very present in her life. She became a vegetarian of her own choice as a response to what she was concerned about in society. She's very focused on the future environment and what her role needs to be in it. So I think that there's a number of issues, but I think that one I have found talking to folks of the current generation all over is really gripping people, and rightfully so. It is the survival issue. It is the thing that your generation has been handed. Not right, not fair. It's what you've been handed. And I do have a certain hope that the generation that you're a part of will be the breakthrough generation that will push a series of changes and have sort of the bravery and the courage to do it that previous generations didn't. I know the changes are there to be made. I know it can be done. I think we've all gotten the memo that climate change is real and we have to act aggressively. So that is one piece. As I said, the way I opened, I think another thing I certainly see a lot of is this issue of fighting inequality in this sense that society, there's another kind of existential crisis in the question of inequality, that we will not be the same society. We got to manage the physical reality of handling climate change, but we have to address the issue of inequality if we want to be a just society and inclusive society. I found a lot of people of your generation really animated by that fight as well. So I think there's a lot out there that's gripping people and moving them. Was there a second part that I missed in your question?
Just in terms of, personally, what motivated you? Was there a specific event or an issue that really caused you to choose the path that you did?
As I said to Maria, I think it was contextual to some extent. I did find over time, there was always, a particular issue at any given point that kind of felt like the most powerful. A good portion of the time, from the end of college into grad school and after, I was very focused on Central America. This was the time of United States intervention in Central America, and it felt profoundly unjust, and it felt like a lot of the mistakes of Vietnam were being repeated in a different form. So that one, for example, was very gripping for me and engaged me. But I think the summary of it is I feel like a lot of people, if they follow their true sense of calling, they really think a little bit the question before about how are you effective or how do you provide leadership in this work. My hope is that people more and more understand the incredible impact they can make, that especially because of social media and because of the breaking down of many barriers. When I was coming up, there was an assumption that demographic barriers in this country really inhibited some possibilities for social change. I think the fact that so many of those barriers have fallen or have been reduced so intensely opens up the possibility of grappling with economic inequality or climate change in a much more profound way. So I think it really does empower the citizen further, and it certainly empowers the citizen who wants to provide leadership to go out and make a greater impact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Morgan Schusterman, and I'm a senior in the College of Arts and Science as well, majoring in psychology. And my question for you, Mr. Mayor, is technology is increasingly one of the largest job sectors, both in New York and nationally. And it seems educators are particularly focused on technology as a tool for teaching, a gateway to learning about the wider world, and as a skill needed for 21st century jobs. So how do you plan on addressing this pressing need for information technology in education at every level?
So I think it is just has to be pervasive, is the first point. It has to be part of everything we do. I think the fact is, New York City public schools, we've been grappling in recent years with, not having enough textbooks, let alone not having enough computers or iPads. And so the notion here is, one, sustaining investment in education writ large and making technology a more central part of that. I mean, certainly what we want to do, for example, with pre-K, technology plays a crucial role. What we want to do with after school and the ability to provide enrichment in a young person's education at the middle school level, technology is going to play a crucial role. Then the notion that in the middle school level and the high school level, we're going to start to link young people more and more to, again, either higher education or to a particular industry, which gives us another platform to say, here's the role the technology plays in those future opportunities for you. And then thereafter, the vision we have for deepening the commitment at the higher education level, particularly through CUNY with a 2-year STEM program. So I think it's the coin of the realm, obviously. And I think for us to actually address educational inequality and create maximum economic opportunity, it just has to pervade everything we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And it's such an important, vibrant part of the fabric of this city, technology.
And by the way, you said it, the situation in Brooklyn is so encouraging.
Yeah.
But go back in time.
Dumbo is on fire.
Dumbo's on fire, but go back in time 15, 20 years. If I had painted you this picture, you might have said, wait a minute, that's a little crazy, right? We have to recognize that, again, we're such a natural home for this sector. That's why I'm so enthusiastic that we have a lot more growth ahead for us.
Hi, Ms. Bartiromo. Hi, Mr. Mayor. My name is Anna. I am a senior studying politics in the College of Arts and Science. Low-income workers usually have to travel the farthest to get to work in New York City. How do you intend to promote the creation of jobs in the outer boroughs while making sure the families can still afford to live there?
Thank you for the question. We're trying to concentrate a lot of our both job creation efforts and housing creation efforts around mass transit. And this may be a shock, but I always say, don't be shocked by anything in government. That was not as strong an assumption until relatively recently. I really believe strongly that there's these very powerful things government can do to foster the right kind of economic growth. And done right, they are huge, provide huge multiplier effects for the private sector and for people who benefit from the jobs. The absence of that smart planning or smart intervention really hurts the ability of the jobs to grow and the housing to be connected to the resources needed. So we're picking up on this. The Bloomberg administration in their planning did, I think, a good job of pioneering some of this. We're really focused on, as we build a lot more market housing, as we build market rate housing, a lot more affordable housing, we're focusing on connecting it to existing mass transit. In a few cases, using it as a context to add additional mass transit options. The fact is, going forward, I believe, and this is sort of, let me separate that first answer, which is about the next years, from something that may be a little more visionary. I think when you think about climate change, and when you think about the dynamics around energy use, the value of mass transit is going to grow intensely. It's going to be much more necessary, not the right thing to do and the thing we wish we would do. It's going to become more necessary. We're going to have to move away from our cars more consistently. We're going to have to embrace mass transit more systematically. That's going to be an opportunity therein to connect a lot more people to the economy in the process. By the way, to create a lot more jobs in the process of expanding mass transit. So short-term, better planning, incentivizing the connection to existing mass transit. Long-term, I think the larger dynamics are going to call for a much greater investment in mass transit. And we have to, of course, try and break through the logjam in Washington, but I think necessity is the mother of invention.
I mean, some people might say the best thing government can do for the economy and for business to create jobs is get out of the way.
I knew that was coming. You know, before you joined Fox, you wouldn't have said that.
Okay, he got me on that.
The Maria Bartiromo I knew.
No, but I mean, you said earlier, you said about the regulation and how, you said this earlier.
There's truth in, look, I am a Democrat, I am a progressive, I believe in the labor movement, but I'd be the first to agree there are times when you need to get out of the way, and I was shocked the more I learned about some of the inner workings of New York City government that inhibited business growth and development of the kind that I thoroughly believed in, like good quality jobs for people, jobs in the outer boroughs, development that was going to create affordable housing, and I saw policies of our government and bureaucracies and regulations standing in the way of those social goods. So no, sometimes government can be in the way, and I gave the example of small business, and you know a lot coming up in Brooklyn about what neighborhood small business means. Some of the policies recently were punitive, and they were undermining job creation. So as a good progressive, I can say to you, yeah, sometimes you do get out of the way. But I also think, I really believe this is not just philosophical. Philosophically, I do believe government has a very positive role to play. But I also think, if again, look at the competitor nations. I mean, come on. India, China, Russia, Brazil, Germany, they did not, it was not just a bunch of people, reading Adam Smith and going out and doing it on their own. Those governments were right there. Infrastructure investment, education investment, research investment, all sorts of things. Right, but I'm saying they were very systematic, more than America is being today, let's face it. And again, this is something I think unites people across the spectrum. America of Dwight Eisenhower's time and John F. Kennedy's time was investing intensely in research, infrastructure, education, and leading the world. Now our competitors are doing it, we're not doing it on a national level, watch out. So that's the example of, whether you're a progressive or a conservative, you can objectively say there's a very practical, crucial equation where government plays a spark plug role, kind of catalytic role in the equation. And yet you can also say there are dynamics when you want it to stand back.
Well, particularly when you look at infrastructure. We need infrastructure help in this city and the country. Yes, sir.
No problem. I think we agreed in the end. I just wanted to know that. We agreed. Let's show that we agreed. There. Okay, good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Corey Blay. I'm a dual degree graduate student in the Stern School of Business and the Wagner School of Public Service.
Whoa.
And I'm graduating in the May. And so
wow.
You can bring us all together.
I hope so. I hope so. So many programs today, including Young Men's Initiative and My Brother's Keeper announced by President Obama, are focusing on the specific challenges facing young men of color across the country. What steps can the city take to really foster a better environment and confront the risks that young men are facing?
So I think there's two strands I would point to. The Young Men's Initiative, something I think I'm very appreciative of, started by Mayor Bloomberg and George Soros, and I think it's a very powerful initiative, and I think it was actually one of the real inspirations for what the president is doing. It gets at a number of the challenges, barriers to employment, barriers to education, even goes as far as trying to address a very painful reality of young men of color, God forbid, end up incarcerated and then don't have a good way back. And where there's actually governmental impediments to them getting back to the workforce, where people have paid their debts to society, and the thing we want for them is to get back to normal and sort of get on a good track, and there's actually impediments that government puts in the way of that. So the Young Men's Initiative really tried to get at the heart of that in a number of creative ways. And I think that's very powerful. I think the most fundamental thing to do is to change policies that set the dynamic in place to begin with. Kind of the theory of the case of a lot of what I'm doing. You can't have a city where young men of color in recent years were treated as suspects, even if they were perfectly law-abiding, doing everything right, everything we asked them. They were treated routinely as suspects, walking down their own street, going to their own corner store. That was the reality of the overuse of stop and frisk. That right away sets the wrong template for success. That starts to close doors right there. You can't have a society where we miss the best opportunities to educate young people, particularly those who came with fewer advantages, which is why we have doubled down on pre-K, because that's one of the most ideal moments to educate anyone, at that age of 3 and 4, and for less advantaged kids, even higher impact. And so reach kids when it's most important, reinforce with after-school programs. By the way, another real interesting crossover points, after-school programs, educators will tell you how powerful they are. Yes. Parents will tell you how powerful they are. Police officers will tell you how powerful they are. Keeping kids in a good, positive setting. Every hour that kid is doing homework, getting tutoring, getting educational enrichment, getting arts and culture, playing sports with their friends in a structured, positive setting, away from some negative influences in a neighborhood.
Absolutely.
You're getting them ahead of the game every single time, right? So these are structural things we can do. And so what I would argue is yes to the initiatives that try to address some of the pain that exists. But let's go to the root cause, because we actually have a lot of the solutions available to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm Julia McCarthy. I'm a second year at the law school, where so many of us were so excited to have a new mayor who's committed to social change.
Thank you.
My question for you tonight is about food policy. I'm wondering how we plan to make healthy food both more accessible in low-income communities and more sustainable.
So first of all, I have NYU Law School envy because it's just such a cool place. So I congratulate you. Then,
it's a great question also.
It is a great question. So one of the things is what we're exploring is we as New York City, and I would argue this is true of cities all around the country. I'm going to come into this with just an easy preface point. I think more and more cities are the engines for change. We have the flexibility, we have the connection to the grassroots, we have the sense of the crisis at hand, whether it is infrastructure, whether it's food, whether it's income inequality. I think, and I've certainly experienced this with my fellow mayors around the country, there's an urgency and a sense of we have to do this ourselves. That cavalry that's supposed to be coming from Washington ain't coming right now. So we got to do it ourselves. And that extends to sustainability. In general, it extends to food supply, and we have some real amazing things we can do, starting with a place like New York, where our purchasing power alone is stunning. I want to see us start to purchase more and more of our food locally. I think that's a perfectly viable thing, given how our purchasing power in effect it allows us to create new market dynamics and make that economically viable. I think there's incredible things happening around the country with rooftop agriculture and urban agriculture and gardens and all that really contribute substantially. And I think the larger issues around food also are about recognizing that there's a crisis of food availability. There's a hunger crisis. And in that, we have, thank God, tools like the SNAP program, but we still have a lot of people who are not being reached, who we can help reach. And then the support we give to food pantries and soup kitchens. So I think it is a lot of different pieces we have to draw together more tightly. But an area where we can actually make a lot of progress, and I think it begins with saying, look, we're not only here to make sure people have enough food, we're also trying to change the nature of the food supply in the process, and we should have that audacity because we actually have the tools to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love that rooftop idea. That's true. We have
we
already
got rooftops.
Seen, yeah, no, we've seen rooftop gardens.
These we got. Rooftops we got.
Yeah. We got to turn them into greens.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Serrano. I'm a senior studying chemical and biomolecular engineering at the NYU School of Engineering in Brooklyn. So before I ask my question, I wanted to hand out these little goodie bags on behalf of NYU as a thank you for coming and speaking.
Thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Me too. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Wow. I like the violet color, don't you?
Yes, very much. We are all about violet.
How apropos.
Yes.
So my question for you is, I know this question's kind of been alluded to, but in summary, if you can give us what is your next 100 days going to look like of office?
Two simple answers. First, whenever you get anything done in government, you actually have to follow it through. So it is amazing and transcendent that we won the funding in Albany for pre-K and after school. We now have to create, on a very large scale, quality pre-K programs all over the city. We have to extend the after-school programs we have and build them out. Let me just give you the scale of ambition here. We're about 20,000 kids in full-day pre-K today in New York City, literally today. By September, we want that number over 50,000. It is a vast undertaking, and we are moving heaven and earth to do it. And the reason we're doing it on that scale and with that speed is because there is a generation of kids turning 4 years old right now who need that start. I don't want them to wait 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. They need it now if we're going to make these changes. So point one is we have to implement that which we have achieved already. We have to make sure paid sick leave is working. We have to deepen the reforms around stop and frisk. There's so many things that need to be followed through and implemented. The second answer is a next wave of big efforts, the 200,000 units of affordable housing, which will be something that is part of this administration for its entire time. Major pieces of that are about to begin. A plan is going to be announced on May 1 to frame that entire effort. It's going to be a vast citywide effort. We're moving forward with a municipal ID card, which will be for all New Yorkers, including undocumented immigrants, because they are 500,000 of our fellow New Yorkers, and they deserve that opportunity. A lot of pieces we're going to play out that build out our agenda. So fasten your seatbelts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, over the last hour that we've been talking, you've complimented. I mean it.
Why is that funny?
What's so funny? This
okay.
is so funny.
Now I get it.
So how does this student become the leader of the greatest city in the world? How does that happen?
Maria, in America, anything can happen. I think I had more hair than that at one point. Yeah. You can see Dante's influence, or my influence on Dante.
And what about NYU's influence?
NYU's influence was amazing. Look, I have to tell you, I think, honestly, because this place was so vibrant, and it really did. It was every kind of kid from every kind of background. And one thing that was very true in my class, huge percentage of kids who were the first generation going to college. So there's a lot of kids who were experiencing the American dream right then and there, right? And very grounded, real-world group of people, but from everywhere, every viewpoint. And I think for me, it was inspiring, it was energizing. It also taught me, one of the most important parts of this job, which is being able to work with everyone of every background in the most cosmopolitan city on earth. So I think this place really, really helped give me the grounding and helped energize the path ahead. I think if you had said at the day that picture was taken that I'd be sitting here now with Maria Bartiromo, no less, okay? I would have said you were crazy.
But you had big aspirations.
I had aspirations to make some progressive, positive impact in the world. I had a vision of hopefully, contributing. I don't think I ever imagined it leading here. So if you work hard enough, if you believe in something, you get a lot of luck on your side, and if you have an excellent degree from New York University, you can go far.
Mayor de Blasio, I think I speak for everyone in the room, lovers of New York, to say to you, thank you so much. We are rooting for you. We want you to succeed big time. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a true delight. Thank you so much.
You're a joy.
I think
And you got a gift bag. I got a gift bag. That's true. We're so proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.